Paulie, thanks very much for joining us on the Al Black Show.
Very glad to be here, mate.
First of all, a big shout out to Optus so apologies to anyone who's listening and seeing some jittery video. Paulie, you've had a rough time with Optus. You haven't paid for anything for the last 5 months, but your internet's a bit shit.
Yeah. Well, that's it. 97% of coverage, but not near the major cities.
Exactly. Unfortunately, you're in one of them. So
out in the desert, you're fine.
Yeah, exactly. Now, mate, now you encompass all four of the points of the show, like music, hospitality, travel, and lifestyle, and we're going to get into each of those today. But let's get right back to the beginning, because I know that your parents had a strong influence on, how you came to be who you are today. So, can you tell me a bit more about them?
Absolutely. Well, my parents were involved in a philosophical school called the Fourth Way since before I was born. So we were very much brought up with mantras and meditations and just the philosophical kind of ideals that perhaps wouldn't be so prevalent in certainly in Catholic Ireland. We were never forced to go to church. Probably the only kids on our street who weren't obliged to go to church. We were given a lot of information about things like reincarnation and different kind of spiritual aspects. When I was attending school, we had a class called religious knowledge, and when the teacher would go, "Is there any questions?" it would always be me with my hand up because I'd have something smart to say that my parents would have told us. And the teacher goes, "So, no questions then. Moving on." They just avoid any of the questions. Because Christian brothers.
It's just waiting for Collie to call bullshit on everything they were saying.
Yeah. That you don't want to ask a Catholic Christian brother, but what about reincarnation? That's been proven.
Yeah.
They just don't want to hear it.
No, so you don't want to get punished by those boys either, do you?
No,
no,
definitely not.
No, that's a whole new world of pain right there.
Yeah.
So how did you end up coming to leave Ireland? And when was that actually?
I left Ireland in '97, I think, and moved with my girlfriend over to England. We moved down to Brighton on the coast. Beautiful kind of seaside town.
Bit of a party town.
Very, very much a party town, especially back in those days. 3 universities. Absolutely, been to his house. Massive parties on the beach, Ovingdean, and
big beach.
Big beach. Yeah, definitely. The beach is all stones though, which is quite different. But everyone hangs out on the beach and plays stone games, in many forms.
You're right. Let's not even go into the stone games. They sound pretty crap. Or have you got any fantastic ones that you want to tell us about?
No, just hundreds of people sitting there trying to hit a plastic bottle with 1,000,000 stones.
Yeah, right.
But, that's how we pass the time.
Gold. All right, so you're in England. How did you find that? Good. Why did you leave?
Well, I stayed in England for about 6 years, but I was alternating between England and Thailand. I found Thailand in about '98. And was the first time I went out there, and it was still quite basic and backwards. And, you didn't have electricity all of the day. You'd only have it at specific hours. And, there'd be one road through the town. I mean, it was a beautiful time to go because it was very much on the backpacker trail. And Koh Phangan specifically had 2 lines worth mentioning in the travel guide. It was an island with this many people, pretty much fishing villages back in those days, and full moon parties that were still only 1,000 or 2,000 people. But Thailand was the first place I actually DJ'd. I had some records, and it was the first gig that I went out and attended to. One of the DJs was playing at this party, and he'd been playing for about 10 hours. And he said, "Does anyone else know how to mix?" I said, "Oh, look, I've had a go a few times." And he goes, "You're on." Yeah. And that was it. I was up and I was playing, and then I flew up to Bangkok, bought some more records. So I had my own set and just started playing gigs in Thailand. Then I came back to England and tried to pursue
Paulie,
it.
so that would be fairly trancey sort of stuff then, I'm guessing, over there, or?
Definitely. Psytrance was the entire scene back in in those days.
And then it was back to England, and then where to from there?
Back to England, and then I started taking DJing seriously. I'd really caught the bug and started working in record stores and buying records and working at club nights. And then that led into running my own club nights, buying a sound system,
And
doing parties on the beaches. And all in Brighton, yeah.
All Brighton, yeah.
Sometimes we go up to London as well, and run parties. But beautiful town to do it, so open to it. Eventually the criminal justice bill came in, and they were cracking down on sound systems and seizing all their equipment, and that was our living, that was our way of earning money, so we really didn't have the ability to be impounded.
Yeah, sorry, Paulie, I was just going to explain that there's many people listening that wouldn't know what the criminal justice bill is, so for the benefit of those people, basically it was a law that was brought in by, I think, the then Conservative government, and basically it banned the congregation of more than a certain number of people, not many, where the playing of repetitive beats was taking place. I think they actually had repetitive beats in the legislation, I think. So they're stopping parties.
Yeah, they could seize all your equipment and hold it for up to 6 months. And we had a few sound systems friends of ours around us who had all their gear impounded and were, basically having to go back and find real jobs because they couldn't make money doing the stuff that they loved. So we decided, we knew this club owner who wasn't doing very well, and he was looking for someone to come in and start running nights, and we already had a big following, so our first night was absolutely rammed, and he loved it, and it brought a lot of money in, and he offered us more nights, and eventually offered us to, he gave me the job of manager of the club, and my business partner was lighting director, which was a job he just made up just so basically he could keep all our lighting in the club, but paid a wage, and we got to run our own nights.
Paulie, I've got a mate, I think, and you know him very well too. He was a lighting director, if that's what you want to call it, at one of the clubs in Melbourne, and I think he went along during the week and programmed them all. But then you'd see him on Sunday morning, and he'd just be off his tits, like just pressing all the buttons. And I don't even know if he was pressing buttons, but it was quite amusing to watch. So yeah, big ups to all the lighting directors out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Over the years, because I had a sound and lighting company later on, and when you're being a DJ and you start doing lighting, the amount of people that would come up and say, "Can you play this song?" Like, I'm actually just doing the lights, but I am doing it in time with the music, so it does kind of look like you're mixing, and you are mixing.
That would be a good trick.
The lighting desk.
Yeah, that'd be a good trick. Okay, so why'd you leave England?
Left England to move to Holland, and Holland was bitter cold and very difficult to find lasting work, really. So we lived in Amsterdam, just outside Amsterdam, in a suburb called Osdorp, very, very beautiful, but very cold as well. And my girlfriend was finding it very difficult to find work, so we returned to Ireland and then kind of planned our trip out to Australia, which, from all the home and aways and neighbours, we envisaged as being beautifully warm and sunny 24 hours a day.
Oh, cool. So that's where it was, and it was Melbourne.
I went to Sydney first, for about 6 months, and Sydney was okay. Sydney's a beautiful city, kind of reminds me of the difference between London and Brighton. London's a bit more of a big city attitude, and you could go up and ask someone for the address of somewhere, and they'd be like, "Sorry, mate, I don't have any change." and you know, you're like, you're not a beggar, you're just asking, but there's that kind of brashness, and they're just kind of pushing you away. Whereas when we came down to Melbourne, very much like Brighton, the warmth of people and the kind of love that we were given almost immediately was amazing. People were inviting us to stay at their houses and do all these things.
Yep.
You know, I was looking for DJ work in Sydney, and I got about 2 gigs. In the whole 6 months I was there. When I got to Melbourne, I got a job running a club within about a week.
Right. So for the benefit of everyone wondering what Paulie's doing as he's jumping around in front of the screen and that banging in the background, that's a puppy, Paulie.
I've got a puppy.
Yeah. What's his name?
Yes, I've got a whippet puppy who likes to chew Kai.
Kai.
He likes to chew plastic bottles.
Fantastic.
or anything that he can really
Don't we
fit
all?
in his mouth.
Okay, so then you ended up in Melbourne, and what year are we talking there?
Arrived in Melbourne first in 99, 2000, and Melbourne was still a very happening city. And if you came from England or Ireland, it gave you a lot of street cred, I suppose, in terms of being a DJ. And certainly the clubs looked at my resume, or I had a portfolio at the time of work that I'd done in England and Ireland. And so that's why I got the job as managing Sub Club, which is where we met.
Yep.
And we, you know, I think they just looked at anyone who had worked in the UK in the dance scene as being streets ahead of what was going on in Australia. And perhaps they were. Certainly all the songs that I had, all the vinyl back in those days, nobody in Melbourne had. So every song I played, you know, was a new song for the crowd, which was great space to be. Now you can just hold your phone up to someone's song and then you have it as well.
Yeah.
So it was a very different time. And you know, if you were the one playing a song, that was your song. If you were the first to drop it, it was your song.
I remember those days. Yeah.
Remember them fondly.
Yeah, exactly. Now, if I remember correctly, you might have even done a few years on an awesome radio breakfast show. How did you find that experience?
Yeah, I absolutely loved it. Always thought of it like laughter therapy with good friends. I mean, you, me, and Anissa, we all had other jobs, and I had my company. You were working for Beat or Impress, and Anissa had a financial services kind of company going at the time. But we'd all meet for 7 to 9, Monday to Friday, to do the breakfast club, and you know, get to interview lots of cool people, give away lots of free stuff, and just generally have a good laugh and take the piss and say things that we probably wouldn't get away with if we were on a more major kind of radio network.
Yeah, I think that's a definitely wouldn't get away with.
Yeah, definitely wouldn't get away.
And are there any you know, is there any specific points from those few years that stick out for you, or?
It's funny, we got to interview so many producers and actors and comedians and that, but one that really stood out for me, Al, was when we you probably remember when we interviewed that guy from Greenpeace, who had, if you remember, the boat had been Eskimo Joe or something, I think his name was, and the boat had been pushed over or capsized by the Japanese whalers, and he'd been knocked out into the water, and we got to speak to him on sat phone. Now, this event was like, you know, worldwide news. It was on every newspaper. It was all over the internet. And we got to chat with him in the morning. You know, the producer had hooked it up, or maybe you'd hooked it up. And we chatted with him about the event and the experience and what he was trying to do and trying to achieve. And I always thought that was a real kind of high point, because you were so current in the events of what was going on. And when I went into college, I was still at music college at the time. When I went into college, people were talking about it. And I was like, oh, yeah, I was chatting to him this morning. They're like, what? No, you weren't. Yeah, totally. Eskimo Joe, he's a cool guy. And you know, and I always felt that beyond the producers and artists and, you know, people who are doing self-promotion, and there's nothing wrong with that, that was a real life event that was very current and very you
It
know,
had
of the
meaning.
moment. Yeah, it had real meaning.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. That's good. Now let's leave the music to one side for a minute, and let's get into the kitchen. How did that whole kitchen thing happening? Was it a bit like the DJing where one day a chef didn't turn up, or he'd done 10-hour shift rather, and he said to you, "Can you grab these knives?" How did that happen?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah,
I
right.
was a kid washing dishes in a restaurant in the city to make extra pocket money after school. And one
Oh,
day,
in
commie
Ireland.
chef
In Ireland.
in Ireland, yeah, one day commie chef didn't show up, so I filled in for him, and apparently did a better job than he did. So they asked me to, you know, to leave that job and take the other guy's job. He never came back, just disappeared. Chefs can be very transient. And so I stayed on doing that every day after school. And eventually they offered me an apprenticeship and wanted to send me on to college and pay for it and do all that. You know, you'd work 5 days a week and go to college 1 day a week.
Yeah, yeah. And how would you describe your cooking style over the years? Did you have one,
Uh,
or?
Yeah, I mean, Italian to begin with, and then I started going into more Asian and Moroccan, I suppose. Trips back and forward to Southeast Asia really inspired my love of Asian food. I liked all this fusion kind of things. I definitely resonate with the kind of Moroccan flavors, lots of lemon and garlic and spices and really tasty food. I would say the description of my food is definitely not bland. Always full of flavor and color. And I mean, I still do some cooking now when I host yoga retreats and workshops and stuff. I'll be making food for, you know, these days more vegan and vegetarian food, for just to show people how interesting it can be. Because often when you go get a vegetarian dish, it tends not to have a lot of flavor, and people often equate flavor with meat. And, you know, certainly you can get great flavor from stocks and jus and reductions and stuff, but the same is absolutely true for vegetarian and vegan food. And I've been vegetarian for about 8 years and probably vegan for 2.
Yeah, right. I mean, I would never have believed that years ago, but as you might know, like my partner Nat, she's vegetarian, and you know, that was one of the first things she said to me. Well, I think the first thing she said to me was, "This is what I'm cooking. If you want something else, you can cook it yourself." I was like, I'll just have what you're having." And then she said to
Yeah.
me the point of you know, when it comes to vegetarian cooking and maybe vegan for that matter as well, you know, because there's no meat in there, you know, you're putting even more flavor in, you know, like
Yeah.
there's a lot to play with there. So I eat vegetarian during the week all the time, and I don't find it tasteless at all, you know. So now,
Yeah, absolutely.
speaking of you know, your time in the kitchen, are there any standout times from over the years, like a favorite place that you worked, or a funny story, or a person that you might have worked with? um
Sure, sure. There's plenty of funny stories.
yeah, let's hear
Um,
that.
I mean, I liked working in almost all the restaurants that I worked in. I really enjoyed that thrill and the high stress kind of juggling act of, you know, managing a very busy restaurant and keeping it all flowing and going through a whole night absolutely rammed without one complaint or one problem or mistake. And there's a certain sense of really, you know, feeling that you've done like a sterling job as you move through and everything's flowing. It's such a beautiful juggle, but you know, it's very high pressure, it's very high stress, and you know, a lot of chefs you'll find are drug addicts and alcoholics, and it kind of, you know, you work
Well, that's
hard, you
what
play
attracted
hard.
me to you in the first place, Paulie.
Well, like attracts like.
Absolutely.
Sure.
Okay, cool. So how do we go from the kitchen, which is like
Yeah.
ultimate stress environment, to the yoga
Yeah.
studio, which is the complete opposite?
Sure. Well, I started doing yoga about 14 years ago, and a friend had recommended it to me. I was still running around, living that kind of high stress thing, just no longer in the kitchen. So I had my sound and lighting company. I was studying at college full-time music production. I was doing the radio show with you. I was DJing at night and teaching DJing at the college. So I was under a lot of pressure. I mean, I was enjoying all of it. It was all things that I loved, but I was constantly running from one thing to the next. And I used to run into the gym to do my workout. And I'd always be under stress, in that kind of running from one thing to the next, never really relaxing. And my friend dragged me into a yoga class and he said, look, I really think, you know, you'll get a lot out of this. And I went in, and the original teacher I had was this old kind of bitter guy. And in the very first class, it was hot. It was vinyasa, so a lot of active, dynamic poses. And in the middle of the class, he goes, some people in this room are sweating too much. A very passive aggressive statement to make to a group of people. Now I was sweating. I always sweat. Yeah. And I was thinking, well, I'm sweating. Is he talking to me? And I was like, I didn't realize there's an off switch to sweating. And surely it's just like a natural bodily function in the heat, working hard. And so I didn't really like it. I didn't resonate with it. I just thought, you know, he was a bit of an asshole, really. But my friend said, oh, look, maybe he was just having a bad day. Come and try this girl. She's much better, much more on the spiritual side. And I think you'll really resonate with that. And, you know, he knew some of what my parents had done or how I was brought up. So went back again with him and gave him another chance. Presence and awareness. I resonated very strongly with this. Continued doing yoga. You know, every time I went back to Thailand, been back about 13, 14 times now, we'd go to yoga retreats and workshops and trainings and stuff, and just kept going with it. Transitioning out of chefing, I had brought my friend over to do a 2-week yoga intensive after he'd split up with his wife, and he was quite depressed. And so he came to me for help, and I said, look, you know, this was a Monday. I said, let's go to Thailand, just do some yoga. He goes, well, you know, I only have this time off. I said, look, I'm actually waiting to start this new job, but I can put them off for another week. So he told me this on Monday, and on Friday we were in Thailand on the beach and started doing yoga. He was a big guy and, you know, worked out a lot in the gym, like his arms wouldn't close against his chest, you know, big and puffed up. But often with those kind of guys, they've got zero flexibility, like he couldn't reach beyond his knees, let alone touch his toes. And after about 2 weeks, we did a lot of swimming and running, yoga classes every day. I brought some philosophical books, and, you know, it really changed where he was at, the vibration he was operating at. And, you know, I got to share my love of yoga with him, and he came back a totally different person, then went on to go off again he actually quit his job and went off to India to explore it even more. And, you know, he absolutely fell in love with it, but it really shifted his vibration. And I was like, wow, it's such a powerful practice to bring to people when they're in a bad space. And, you know, there's that old saying, you're never more than one yoga class away from a better mood.
Yeah, right. So and now he's sitting up a mountain eating tree bark somewhere in India, is he?
Yeah, possibly. Yeah. Well, that was a few years ago.
Hey, just quickly, I remember you once told me a story about how you got into yoga, and there was a guy involved in a car accident. Do you remember that one?
Yeah.
So,
yeah, sure.
Just a quick rundown of that one, because I thought that was a good story around yoga.
Yeah, so there was a car accident outside my apartment on Carlisle Street, and a guy was knocked down by an old woman in a car, and he had come off the bike and he had literally skinned his whole leg. And everyone, there was a big group of people around it who'd seen it. It's quite a busy street in Melbourne, and lots of people were giving her a hard time. And he was actually calming the people down and saying, look, it's all right. And, you know, the ambulance has been called. And because I lived next door, I went in and I was getting, you know, some first aid stuff for him and trying to make sure he was okay. And at the end of it, like, she was very upset and he was actually really grounded and calm. And at the end of it, I said to him, mate, I just got to tell you, I've got the utmost respect for the way that you handled that situation, and totally calm. And he said one word to me, and he didn't know I was involved in yoga, and he just goes, yoga. And I knew exactly what he meant. I knew that he was probably doing his breathing and pranayama through it. And so he, even though he'd been the one knocked down, he was the calmest person in the space. And calm is this so much underrated superpower, because he could have been freaking out. He could have been blaming and criticizing, and, you know, it wouldn't have changed the result. It wouldn't have made it any better. It wouldn't have made him or her feel better, you know? So he remained calm all the way till the ambulance. And I'm sure he was in pain. Yeah. He was literally skinned down the side of his leg, and, you know, probably wasn't going to be cycling for quite a while. But what was the point in resentment and anger? And he just maintained his presence, and I really respect for that.
He probably thought, well, you know, if I'm going to go around wearing lycra like this, I probably deserve it.
That's true. I know you have a lot of love for cyclists.
Well, I'll tell you what, being the new age kind of guy that I am, I've heard of a few different types of yoga, I guess, but I discovered a new type recently, and I was hoping you could explain it to me. Well, sure. I was on your Instagram page, and up the top it said you are a teacher of Irish yoga. So, just for a laugh, I popped Irish yoga into Google, and I discovered it's actually a thing. So according to, and I'm guessing this is not how you wanted it to come out on your.
No, it just says Irish yoga teacher.
Yeah, but I read it like, I was like, oh, hold on a minute. So according to the Urban Dictionary, Irish yoga involves. Do you know what it involves?
Alcohol, probably.
Yeah, it involves a night of heavy drinking and then passing out in a strange position. So guys, when you're out there listening, I'll tell you what, go to Google and type in Irish yoga and look up the images, and they are hilarious. Like,
look, I could probably teach a few people that, but I don't reckon I could teach you anything about getting drunk and passing out in various positions.
Mate, I'm a black belt in that one.
I know.
I was going to say, if you teach it, let me know, and we could even just, I'll sign up. We could do it remotely. I think I'll just go down to the bottle shop and get a bottle of Jameson and just give you a call, and you can just talk me through it as I scull the bottle of whiskey. No, all right, we're being silly now. We're being silly. Okay, so you've recently set up your own studio. Tell us a bit about that, your yoga studio.
I have done it. It's very exciting and nerve-wracking and anxiety fueled all at the same time, but at some point you've got to take that step really into fulfilling what your dreams and what you've been doing. I've been building up equipment over the years, running workshops and teacher trainings and retreats and stuff. So I had all the bolsters, blocks, blankets, straps, eye pillows. I literally had all the stuff that you would need for a studio in my house, certainly clogging up my house. And so eventually I just had to hire a space, and we've built this beautiful kind of Moroccan styled studio down the road from my house called YogaCita, and it's building up very nicely. We've got a treatment room, we've got a soundproof meditation room at the back, and it's coming along beautifully at the moment. So I'm very, very positive about it, and live the life you love and do something that you love, and it never really feels like work.
Absolutely. Now, you touched on it before. You mentioned yoga retreats and that you're doing those these days. Can you give us more insight into what actually happens with them and how often they take place?
Well, I've got 3 over the next 3 weekends, but it's working for different people. So often I'm running my own, but actually, I'm doing 3 over the month of September now for different people. I guess it's an opportunity to get away from the city for a start, and go to a space that's, perhaps beautiful, or, it could be more ashram style. It might be like bunk bed kind of situation, or it could be luxury, as many of these resorts that I work at are. I guess it's just a weekend of mindfulness and meditation, vegan food, a chance to really absorb the practice rather than just showing up for a 1 hour or an hour and a half class. You get to really embody the yoga that you're doing and live amongst a community or a group of people who are also sharing that kind of ideal, that generally be talks about philosophy or, you know, the real ideas of yoga and understanding of yoga. You get to, you know, get up early, start your practice, have some beautiful breakfast, you know, continue on. Maybe there'll be other events during the day, like mindful walking, or maybe you get to go out into the country and do things. So I guess it's just a step away from the kind of stresses of modern living.
Yeah. Okay.
My puppy wants to get involved in this chat.
I can see that. I can see that. But maybe he wants to go to the next retreat.
Yeah, he
Now,
does.
I also noticed on the studio's website that you do gong baths. So do people have to bring their own, do people have to bring their own towels to those classes, or are they supplied?
Well, it's a sound bath, so you know, it kind of washes over you. Gongs are very challenging because you know, sound healing stuff can be very nice and pleasant to listen to, whereas the gong is a kind of sound healing device that really challenges your mind, because your mind tries to make sense of gong don't follow that kind of rhythmic and structured things, so your brain tries to make sense of it for a while, but it can't, because it doesn't follow any particular, you know, we're constantly trying to explain and understand and how we you know, understand things. We're trying to frame it and put it in a way of knowledge for ourselves, but the gong doesn't do that. It really takes you out. The noises and the sound can be very challenging, be very dark and vibration, and it can really stimulate a lot of emotions. So the gong workshops are very powerful kind of healing modalities, although you may you know, have some horrific dreams afterwards. It can certainly bring up a lot of stuff, but you know, often we bury this stuff deep, and it comes out in other ways if we don't really address it and deal with it.
Yeah, sure.
Have you ever done?
I've never
done a gong workshop?
I must admit, when I saw it on the website, like I did a double take. I was like, gong bath. Like I've never even heard the phrase. So, but you know, never say never. I'm not saying I wouldn't do it, but yeah, give that one a go next time. Now, sort of just stepping back a bit to what we're talking about when you were doing all the traveling and first coming over here. Sure. Now, when I say over here, I mean to Australia. Now, over here in Perth, we've got what seems to be quite a transient population. So we've got a lot of people coming from overseas, all over the place. I was sitting with a bunch of Germans and Dutch just Sunday afternoons, just a couple of days ago. And believe it or not, your name actually seems to pop up in my conversations with them quite a bit, funnily enough.
Yeah, right.
And you're probably thinking, why is that? So as you can imagine, a lot of them, they get to Perth or Australia and they decide they want to live here. But as you know, it's not that easy. And I think many people who are from here can take that for granted, you know, like, oh,
absolutely,
whatever, you know, you don't really appreciate it until you had to fight. Or a lot of people might not appreciate it unless they've had to fight to get here. So can you tell me some of the hoops that you had to jump through in order to get your permanent residency?
Wow. Yeah, I mean, I actually think it's probably even more difficult these days, but back in the day when I was going through it, I had come here originally. I had totally intended to stay in Australia, so I'd moved everything I owned over here, including my company, and I was studying full-time for 3 years as well as running the company. But at the end of that, to stay, I had to get sponsored. So they weren't particularly, DJs weren't high on the list of people that they needed in Australia, but chefs were.
Yeah,
and
right.
So it was quite easy for me to get sponsored as a chef, and especially Irish chefs are very high in demand, and we're supposedly quite good and good work ethic anyway. And so I worked for a couple of restaurants. You know, the problem with working for a restaurant under sponsorship kind of deal is they feel like they own you.
Yeah.
So, you know, it would be you know, you generally work long hours as a chef. You stay and you just work. And I was working previously for the restaurant before I had to get sponsored, and I was earning 60,000 a year. And then when they did sponsor me, I was doing more work for $45,000 a year.
Right,
So
not
they
really
just
working out.
yeah, dropped my wages and increased my hours. So I was doing about 65, 70 hours a week. And, you know, I was living in Australia, but all I was doing was spending all my time in a fluorescent filled room.
Yeah.
I never actually saw the sun. I worked from 10 in the morning till 12 at night, pretty much 5 or 6 days a week. And eventually I decided, you know what, you know, if I have to live life like this to get to stay in Australia, then that's not really what I wanted. So I decided to make the break from them, because they wouldn't kind of meet me halfway anywhere. And they know you're like a slave, really, when you're under that kind of thing. And they know, if you leave, or, you know, if you lose your sponsorship, basically you have to leave the country, and you may have to leave the country within 2 weeks. You know, certainly if immigration find out. But I was quite lucky, and I found another restaurant, Pelican in St. Kilda, who offered me sponsorship straight away. I was recommended to them, and he took me on board straight away. And it was over Christmas, so immigration never actually found out. So I was quite lucky, because there was a period there where I wasn't sponsored, or I wasn't particularly legal in Australia, but I managed to sort it out quite quickly. And I stayed there and was going through my sponsorship. And at the time I was with my girlfriend. I got poached out of that restaurant by a new restaurant that opened in the city. And, you know, I was about halfway through being able to get my permanent residency, but they offered me double wages. It was Mods. Simon Modra, who worked with us occasionally on the radio show, and he was part of the team that had set up La Di Da, and he offered me the head chef position of that and the cafe that they had next door. But they literally doubled my wages.
Yeah.
You know, overnight. They paid $5,000 to transfer me out of Pelican and into that restaurant, and they started me on an incredible wage for a chef.
Yeah.
And so I decided to take the risk and move there. Even though it would start me off again in terms of my permanent residency. And in the end, a lot of the directors got shafted and left, and I was kind of left with this group of Greek gangster ice heads. As you know, often you'll find restaurant owners can be put in that category.
Yeah.
But,
they sound like lovely blokes.
Yeah, oh, lovely. And they basically ran the place down. We were doing kind of much more finer food, restaurant quality thing. They were all about bar food and parmas and pizzas and chips and stuff. And so I remember one of the director's wives coming into me and going, I don't think a chef should be paid more than $50,000 a year, and which is a disgusting attitude, because we work so hard. But, you know, that is a common wage for a chef. And I was thinking, you have no idea that I'm on $110,000 a year. You know, I don't know how long it's going to last for when you start to find out what I'm actually getting paid here. So, you know, a few months later, they pulled me aside and said, look, you're one of the best chefs we've ever worked with, but we want to go down a path. We want to dumb down the food. We want to focus more on the club, because it was a bar, nightclub, restaurant, and we had a cafe on the side as well. And they said, look, we just know that's not going to be what you want to do. So I had left my sponsorship deal to go and do this with them, but I'd earned a lot of money in the meantime, and I had a lot of money in the bank. And so he did say to me, you know, fair play to him, he said, look, we won't tell immigration, you know, being the dodgy people that they were. He just didn't care.
But
yeah,
wasn't the story that didn't they tell you they were filling out the paperwork to sponsor you, then they weren't? Was that the deal there, or was that something else?
Well, they were very negligent in what they were doing. No, they paid for they paid for the sponsorship to transfer over and everything, but you know, it came to the point that once I finished with them, I then didn't have sponsorship and I wasn't relevant, but I did have a girlfriend and we'd been together a couple of years, and we didn't really know what to do. Should we move back to Europe, or, you know, if immigration found out, they could just force us to do that. So you know, we thought about, lots of people were saying to us, just get married, just get married. And I was probably the one who was a bit more hesitant than her.
Yeah.
And so we said, traveling, you know, it's such a telling thing for a couple. Either, you know, you could be the greatest couple in the world at home, but travel together and you might absolutely kill each other. And,
Yeah.
you know, you could celebrate 2 weeks into the holiday. So I said, look, let's go traveling. You know, traveling will really ground you, and, you know, it'll bring us together or it'll split us up. So we went to Thailand for 6 months, and we really, you know, 24/7 with each other, traveling. And, you know, eventually we kind of found a village that I knew very well, and we stayed there for about 4 months, the last 4 months. And we got married. We decided we wanted to come back to Australia, so we got married at the end and came back to Australia. But even then, we had a Buddhist ceremony on the beach, barefoot, with loads of friends and family and people we'd met along our travels fly down for it. But the Buddhist ceremony was amazing. About 7 months, all chanting and singing, tying your hair together, throwing water over you. It was amazing, all in Thai, so no one understood anything, but people were crying. It was very emotional and moving, and it was really, really beautiful ceremony. Can highly recommend it if someone's interested in it.
I don't know how they're going to tie my hair in with anyone's.
yeah, indeed. Well, we came back to Australia then, and I had to re-enter on a tourist visa while we sorted out the actual R visa, and then we found out the Australian government won't recognise that you've been married in, you know, a Buddhist ceremony. So we had to schedule another wedding at the registry office, but the only time that we could actually get one was 2 months and 3 weeks after I arrived. Now, I only had a 3-month tourist visa, so if it went longer than that, I would have to leave, maybe go to New Zealand, come back in, more expense, and you're already paying thousands of dollars to the government for these kind of visa applications. Yeah. So we got married at the registry office a week before I was supposed to leave the country again, and then submitted everything immediately, went straight from the registry office into immigration office in the city, and guy, get off me. And we submitted it, and then had to pay like extra money to get the marriage certificate sped along in the process. So I literally handed it in to immigration the day before I was supposed to leave, and managed to get a bridging visa so I could stay in Australia. And
that is
so it was very tight.
Very last
there were a few close calls.
And going back again, like, were you not doing the sound production courses just so you could stay? Like, was that, if you do a full-time course, then that was at some point enough for you to stay in the country, or were you just doing them because you wanted to do sound production? Or a bit of both?
No, I absolutely wanted to do it, but it was certainly at the age I was at, it was a way to come back into Australia. And they had a part-time course for 5 years, and I would have preferred to have done that. And, you know, that would have given me opportunity to make my company work and stuff. But if you're an international student, they don't give you those options. They don't give you any benefit for being a student. They charge you twice as much as a terrestrial or an Australian student would get. So, you know, I had to do the 3 years full time, and it just gave us the opportunity to figure out, you know, I had faith in myself that I would find a way to figure it out, and I managed to. Now I'm 15 years in Australia.
Good work, mate. Nice one. Now we're almost at the end. So before we find out what your all-time favorite party story is that you're happy to talk about on the show, I just wanted to see if you've got any shameless plugs that you want to do for anything that you're up to at the moment.
Sure. Well, if you're in Melbourne, come down, check out the new studio, YogaCita. Really beautiful, mindful space. We put a lot of energy into doing what we're doing and creating that kind of environment and community.
What's the website?
You know, www.yogacita.com.au,
How do
or
you
you can
spell
find us on
Sita?
CITA. So
Right.
YogaCita. And YogaCita really means yoga consciousness, or
Okay.
kind of
And is that .com.au?
.com.au. Yeah.
And you're on Facebook as well?
Yeah, we're on Facebook, we're on Instagram, we've got all the kind of social media happening, as you have to these days.
Sure. Okay. Nice one. Well, I think you're probably going to have to take Kai for a walk very shortly. So we'll get straight into your favorite party story of all time that you're happy to talk about on the show.
Sure. I suppose there was a night we were in Revolver, you and me, and we had the radio show on that morning, so we just decided to go straight through the night, as was typical in that day.
It's like, oh, I've got a good idea. Why don't we
just stay up all night and then do the radio show?
It'll be fun.
But you had an even better idea. Why don't we just invite half the club down to the radio station? So
right.
Half the club followed us in to do the radio show. It was very, very hectic. And the owners, Timmy and Kate, they live next door. And so halfway through the show, the phone started buzzing and we answered the phone, and it was the owner, Timmy. And he's like, why are there 3 people in the tree outside my window?
It's like, I don't know, you'd have to ask them.
Yeah, nothing to do with us, Timmy. Just random clubbers climbing a tree.
We're not in the tree, it wasn't us. But I think there was a guy on the roof as well.
Yeah.
Now, I'm normally got the worst memory for these sort of things, but I reckon it wasn't Revs, it was Q Bar.
Oh, possibly.
Because think about it, like when I think I've been to Revs once on a weeknight, but I've been to Q Bar thousands of times on a weeknight. So
yeah, you could be right. Could be Q Bar.
I reckon it was a Friday morning and we'd done Q on the Thursday night.
Yeah, that sounds possible. All those nights blur into one, don't they?
Yeah. Oh, I do remember that more. I don't remember the night, but I remember the morning, like walking out the back for a ciggy and just seeing people up on the roof and just like, oh, what, and in the tree. So good times, Paulie. Good times.
Very good times.
All right, mate. Well, thank you so much for taking the time today. It's been great to chat to you and to relive some memories and to hear all about what you're doing these days with the yoga.
Thanks, mate. It's been an absolute honor.
All right. Well, thanks again, and all the best.
Namaste.
Namaste.